She never begged. That was the part he never understood. Every alpha in the history of the Ashveil pack had known one absolute truth: when you break a mate bond, the rejected wolf breaks with it. They cry. They plead. They wither. They either fight for their mate or they crawl into the quiet corners of the world and waste away. Celeste Varro did none of those things. She stood in the center of the ceremonial hall, in a white dress she had saved 3 months of her design salary to buy, surrounded by 400 wolves who had watched Dorian Ashveil take her hand and promise her the world 6 months ago. She stood there while he announced, with his jaw set and his eyes cold, that the bond was a mistake. That the pack needed a stronger match. That Lyra Crane, daughter of the Northern Alliance, was his true intended. And Celeste Varro did not cry. She looked at Dorian Ashveil, the man whose soul she had felt tethered to hers like a second heartbeat, and she said 3 words that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Goodbye, Alpha Ashveil." Then she turned, walked out of the hall, and vanished from the face of the earth. The pack whispered about it for weeks. They called her dignified. They called her cold. Some said she must not have loved him at all to leave without a fight. Some said she was dead. Dorian's beater Rhett said nothing, because Rhett was the only one who had seen Celeste's face in that final second before she turned away. He was the only one who had seen her shatter. And now, 5 years later, Dorian Ashveil stood in the smoking ruins of the third pack estate he had destroyed in her name, his knees finally giving out beneath the weight of everything he had done and everything he had lost, waiting, desperately, pathetically, completely, for the woman he had thrown away to say one single word. His name. This is the story of what happened in between. This is the story of a rejection that became a revolution. And a man who burned his entire legacy to the ground for the chance, just the chance, to be forgiven. To understand why Dorian Ashveil's world crumbled the way it did, you first have to understand what Celeste Varro was before he decided she wasn't enough. She was not born into power. She was not the daughter of an alpha or the heir to a territory. She was the youngest child of Marin Varro, a seamstress who lived on the eastern edge of Ashveil Packland, in a small stone cottage that smelled of pine needles and wood smoke. Celeste grew up understanding that she was ordinary. She had no gift for fighting. No command in her voice. Her wolf was quiet and light-footed, more at home running through autumn forests than standing on ceremony floors. What she had was this: she saw people. Truly saw them. Not their rank or their bloodline, but the architecture of who they were underneath. She had been drawing portraits since she was 9 years old, charcoal sketches of every pack member she had ever met, capturing not just their faces but the specific weight behind their eyes. By 22, she had built a small but fiercely loyal following as a freelance illustrator, designing pack insignias, crest logos, and ceremonial banners for packs across the Pacific Northwest. That was how she met Dorian Ashveil. He had commissioned her for a new crest. He had arrived at her cottage studio unannounced on a Tuesday morning in October, all 6 feet 4 inches of him folded awkwardly into her small workshop doorway, and the mate bond had ignited between them so violently that he had knocked over an entire shelf of ink jars. He had laughed. She had never heard an alpha laugh like that, sudden and genuine, like something caught him off guard. She had thought, in that moment, that she understood why fate chose people for each other. Not because they were equal in power or status, but because one person could unlock something in another that nothing else in the world could reach. For 6 months, she believed she had unlocked Dorian Ashveil. She was wrong. Or rather, she was right, but it was too late, and the price of the lesson was everything. Because what Celeste did not know, what Dorian had never told her, was that 3 years before their meeting, he had made a political promise. A quiet, ugly promise to the Northern Alliance that if they aligned their military resources with the Ashveil pack, he would consider their daughter Lyra Crane as a potential mate. He had never expected the bond with Celeste. He had never expected any of it. And when Lyra's father called in the debt, Dorian Ashveil did what powerful men with poor hearts have always done. He chose the crown over the person who made him feel alive. He told himself it was strategy. He told himself Celeste would understand, eventually. He told himself the pack needed this alliance more than he needed her. He stood in front of 400 witnesses and he lied to all of them, including himself. And Celeste Varro walked out of that hall and disappeared. What follows is the story of what she built in her silence. What follows is the story of what Dorian destroyed in his guilt. And what follows, at the very end, is the moment 5 years in the making when a king fell to his knees in the ashen ruin of his own making, and a woman who had survived his worst decided whether he deserved her best. The ceremonial hall of the Ashveil estate had never looked more beautiful, and Celeste had never felt more afraid. She stood at the entrance, her fingers laced tightly together, watching the 400 guests settle into their seats below the vaulted cedar ceiling. Lanterns hung in long golden chains. White flowers lined every aisle. The entire pack had come, elderly wolves who had seen a dozen bonding ceremonies, young cubs perched on their parents' shoulders, ranked officers in their formal grey coats. All of them were here for her. Or so she had believed. Her brother Ezra appeared at her elbow, sharp-eyed and quiet. He was 7 years older than her and had the specific talent of sensing danger the way other wolves sensed weather. He had been tense for 3 days. She had told herself it was nothing. "You look beautiful," he said, but his voice had a tightness in it that made her stomach turn. "Ezra. What's wrong?" "Nothing. Come on, they're starting." She let him lead her down the side aisle. She scanned the front of the room for Dorian and found him immediately. She always found him immediately, the bond pulling her eyes to him like a compass needle finding north. He was standing at the ceremonial dais in his formal black coat, his silver chain of office glinting at his collar. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at his hands. The ceremony master called the hall to order. The crowd hushed. Dorian finally raised his head. Their eyes met across the room, and Celeste felt the bond pulse between them, warm and aching and real. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. He was pale. He looked exhausted. But he was still hers. He was still. "People of Ashveil," Dorian said, his voice filling the hall, steady and authoritative and utterly devoid of the warmth she knew. "I have called you here tonight not for a bonding ceremony, but for an announcement." The room shifted. Celeste stopped walking. The bond that was identified between myself and Celeste Varro was premature. After careful consideration of the pack's future and the responsibilities of this seat, I have determined that a formal alliance with the Northern Crane family better serves the strength and survival of Ashveil. He paused. His jaw tightened. Lyra Crane will be the next Luna of this pack. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Celeste had ever heard. She was aware of Ezra's hand closing around her arm. She was aware of the 400 faces turning toward her, some shocked, some pitying, some carefully, cruelly neutral. She was aware of Dorian finally looking at her, his grey eyes hollowed out with something that might have been guilt or might have been relief, and she could not tell which was worse. She felt the bond in her chest, that beautiful, burning second heartbeat, stutter. She thought, he is going to take it back. He is going to realize what is done. Any second now. He did not take it back. Celeste Varro took one long breath. She felt the tears behind her eyes, the kind that come from somewhere so deep they could drown you. She locked them away. Every single one. She looked at Dorian Ashveil, the man whose laugh had sounded like a surprise, and she gave him the last words she would ever say to him on his terms. "Goodbye, Alpha Ashveil." She turned and walked out. She did not run. She did not stumble. She walked through those great cedar doors with her chin level and her spine straight, and she did not look back. Not because she wasn't dying inside, but because he didn't deserve to see it. She drove through the night with no destination and no plan, only Ezra's voice on the phone telling her he was coming. Wherever she was, he was coming. She told him to stay. She told him she was fine. She pulled over on a mountain road outside of Bend, Oregon, and she sat in the dark and she allowed herself exactly 45 minutes to fall apart. She cried until her throat hurt. She pressed her forehead against the steering wheel and she screamed until the sound was gone. She felt the bond in her chest go cold and brittle, like a green branch in January, still attached but slowly, certainly dying. Then the 45 minutes ended. She wiped her face. She started the car. She drove east. She ended up in Portland, in a one-room apartment above a print shop owned by a woman named Odalise who asked no questions and charged fair rent. Celeste paid 3 months upfront with the savings she had never touched, the running away fund her mother had taught her to keep. God bless her mother's foresight. She cut her long dark hair to her jaw. She changed her last name on her freelance profiles to Veil. She reached out to exactly one person in the supernatural world, a neutral territory contact, a vampire gallery owner named Sable who dealt in high-end commission art for clients who valued absolute discretion. I need work, Celeste told her. I need a lot of it. And I need no one to know where I am. Can you paint large format? Sable asked. I can learn. She learned. She learned oil and acrylic and mixed media. She learned the specific visual language of 7 different supernatural factions, their symbols and colors and the iconography that carried weight in their worlds. She painted pack crests, coven seals, pride murals for the shifter-neutral neighborhoods that were quietly expanding up and down the West Coast. Within 8 months, she had a waiting list. Within 18 months, she had incorporated a studio. Within 3 years, Celeste Varro Art and Brand Studio was the most sought-after supernatural design house in the Pacific Northwest, with satellite offices in Portland, Vancouver, and Denver. She employed 12 people, 7 of them wolves from packs who had heard about the woman who had built something extraordinary from nothing, in silence, without asking anyone for permission. She still felt the ghost of the bond sometimes. In the early mornings, before she was fully awake, she would reach for that second heartbeat and find only an echo. She refused to call it grief. She called it fuel. Ezra visited every few months. He brought her news from the world she had left behind, and she always told him she didn't want it. He told her anyway, because he was her brother and that was his job. And so, near the end of the 3rd year, Ezra sat across from her at her studio drafting table, watched her work, and said very carefully, Dorian Ashveil rejected Lyra Crane 6 months after your ceremony. Apparently it was never a real bond. She's gone back north. Celeste did not look up from her work. He's been looking for you, Celeste. He has trackers out. The whole Western Territory knows his. Ezra. Yeah. I know. She set down her pen. She looked at the canvas on the far wall, a commission for the Cascade Valley Pride, 48 inches of wolves running at dawn, the light hitting each figure like they had been born from fire. Let him look, she said. I'm not hiding from him. I'm just not ready to be found. And when you are. Celeste picked her pen back up. The ghost of a smile moved across her face, quiet and dangerous and nothing like the girl who had worn a white dress and believed in certainty. He'll know, she said. Dorian Ashveil stopped sleeping approximately 6 weeks after Celeste walked out of his ceremonial hall. He told himself it was stress. He told himself it was the alliance negotiations with the Northern Crane family, which were already crumbling. He told himself it was the weight of leadership, the border disputes with the Iron Ridge Pact to the south, the drought that was stressing the Eastern Territory. He told himself a great many things that were not true. The truth was that the bond he had publicly declared premature, the bond he had dismissed in front of 400 witnesses, did not release him. It had no interest in his political calculations. It sat in his chest like a live wire, crackling and burning, sending shocks through him at the most inconvenient times. In council meetings. In the shower. At 3 in the morning when the estate was silent and he lay in a bed that still, somehow, smelled faintly of ink and pine. Rhett, his beater, watched all of this with the expression of a man watching a building burn and knowing he wasn't allowed to call the fire department. Find her, Dorian ordered, at the 3-month mark. I've tried, Rhett said. She doesn't want to be found. Try harder. They tried harder. They found nothing. Celeste Varro had vanished so completely that even the Ashveil Pack's considerable intelligence network came back empty. No flight records. No new lease. No social profiles. She had shed her identity like a skin and walked out of it. Dorian dismissed Lyra Crane at the 6-month mark. It cost him the Northern Alliance and 3 years of border security. He paid it without flinching. At year 2, a rumor surfaced about a wolf artist in Portland, a woman named Veil who painted like she had something to prove and ran a design studio that was making serious waves in the supernatural community. Dorian sent a tracker to Portland. The tracker came back bruised and empty-handed, and would only say that the woman's brother had been very persuasive about her privacy. At year 3, Dorian began taking his aggression out on the world in earnest. He picked 3 territorial disputes that had sat dormant for decades and forced them to conclusions, each one more brutal than the last. The council sent warnings. He ignored them. He was not, by this point, entirely certain he cared about the council. His pack watched their alpha transform from a precise, strategic leader into something rawer and more dangerous. He was still effective. He was still winning. But there was a desperation to his victories now, a quality like a man trying to fill a hole with the wrong material. You need to stop this, Rhett told him, at year 4, after Dorian had spent 3 days barely sleeping and had challenged 2 rival alphas in the same week over border lines that barely mattered. I'm fine. You haven't been fine in 4 years. You rejected your fated mate in front of the whole pack, she disappeared, and now you're punishing the world for it. Dorian went very still. Get out of my office, Rhett. Dorian. Get out. Rhett left. Dorian sat alone in his office until midnight. Staring at a charcoal sketch he had found in the bottom drawer of his desk, one of Celeste's early drawings, a portrait she had done of him that first week, capturing something in his expression that no photographer had ever managed to catch. He looked like a man who was happy. He barely recognized himself. She chose the Solstice Summit because it was the one place in the supernatural world where no alpha could touch her. The summit was held every 5 years at the Grand Ridgeline Hotel in Spokane, neutral territory by century-old treaty, hosted by the Council of Elders, attended by every significant pack, pride, and coven leader in the Pacific Northwest. It was the one gathering where power was measured not in territory or muscle, but in reputation and alliance. Celeste Varro, no longer Varro, not yet ready to be Varro again, walked through the hotel's grand entrance at 8 o'clock on the evening of the summit, and the supernatural world noticed. She wore deep burgundy, tailored and precise, her dark hair swept back from a face that had grown from pretty to striking in the years since she had left. She walked with the easy confidence of a woman who had spent 5 years building something undeniable, flanked by Ezra on her left and Sable, the vampire gallery owner, on her right. 3 of her studio's most prominent clients, a coven elder, a pride leader, and an alpha from Eastern Washington, stopped to greet her within the first 5 minutes. She was not hiding. She was not sneaking. She was arriving. The whisper moved through the hall like wind through tall grass. Celeste Varro is here. Dorian Ashveil heard it from across the room. He turned, and the bond he had been carrying like a coal in his chest for 5 years, blazed so suddenly and completely that he knocked his drink off the bar and didn't notice. She was real. She was here. She looked like someone had taken the girl he remembered and sharpened her against every hard surface the world had to offer. She was more beautiful than he had remembered, but it wasn't the beauty that undid him. It was the fact that she was laughing at something the coven elder said, a genuine, unguarded laugh, and she was not looking for him at all. She was not looking for him. He had spent 5 years looking for her. And she had spent 5 years not needing to be found. He started toward her before he'd made the decision to move. Rhett grabbed his arm. Don't, Rhett said quietly. She's here, Rhett. I know. And she chose a room full of 100 witnesses. Which means she's in control of this. Not you. Let her come to you, or let her go. But do not walk up to her in front of the entire summit and make a scene. Dorian stopped. He watched Celeste move through the room easy, purposeful, entirely at home in her own skin, and for the first time in 5 years he understood something with terrible clarity. She didn't need him anymore. She had built a life so complete, so solid, so undeniably hers that she had arrived at the most important gathering in the supernatural West as a power in her own right, not as anyone's mate or anyone's almost. He had rejected her to strengthen his pack. She had left and become stronger without him. He was still staring when her eyes finally, deliberately, found his across the room. She held his gaze for exactly 3 seconds. Her expression did not change. Then she turned back to her conversation. Dorian Ashveil, Alpha of Ashveil, destroyer of alliances, terror of the western border, felt something move through him that he had no name for. It felt like deserving it. The trouble started an hour into the summit, and it started because of Mace Calloway. Mace Calloway was the Alpha of Iron Ridge, the same Iron Ridge whose southern border disputes Dorian had been forcibly resolving for 3 years. He was broad, blonde, and possessed of the specific arrogance that comes from never having been truly beaten. He had arrived at the summit with a delegation of 8 and a political agenda that was, as Sable whispered to Celeste near the East Terrace, almost certainly designed to publicly humiliate the Ashveil pack. What none of them had anticipated was that Calloway's agenda had a second item on it. He found Celeste near the terrace railing, alone for a moment while Ezra refilled drinks, and he introduced himself with the smooth ease of a man who believed his rank was its own introduction. "Celeste Varro," he said. "I've been hoping to meet you. I have a commission request that I think would be very lucrative for your studio." "I'm at capacity until next spring," Celeste said pleasantly. "My assistant can put you on the wait list. I was thinking more of a partnership arrangement." Calloway stepped closer. His tone shifted, still polished, but with something underneath it. "Iron Ridge is expanding. We're looking for a creative director. Permanent position. Full relocation package. You'd have resources you can't access independently." Celeste looked at him calmly. "I built what I have independently. That's specifically why I'm not interested in giving it to someone else." Calloway's eyes narrowed slightly. He reached out and touched her arm, not aggressively, but with the casual possessiveness of a man who expected the gesture to land differently than it did. "You're very talented, Celeste. It would be a shame to waste that on small commissions when you could be building a legacy. Take your hand off her arm." The voice came from directly behind Calloway, and every person on the terrace went still. Dorian Ashveil stood 6 feet away, and he was not wearing the careful political mask Celeste had last seen on him. He looked like a man who had just walked through a wall. "Ashveil," Calloway said, dropping his hand slowly, turning. His expression sharpened into something anticipatory. "This doesn't involve you. She is my mate." The terrace went absolutely silent. "She is nothing of the kind," Calloway said, smiling now, sensing an advantage. "You rejected her publicly. In front of your entire pack. She has no rank, no bond, no tie to Ashveil whatsoever." He paused, letting the words land. "She's unclaimed. Which means if she accepts my offer, there's nothing you can do about it." Celeste looked between them. She had not asked for this. She had specifically not asked for this. But she also recognized the machinery of it. Calloway had known exactly what he was doing approaching her. He had known Dorian was watching. This had never been a commission offer. It was a provocation, dressed in a business suit. "Both of you," Celeste said clearly, "are going to stop talking about me like I'm a territory." Neither of them listened. They never did, at first. Dorian's eyes had gone fully amber. His alpha aura was rolling off him in waves that made the air on the terrace feel thick. He stepped forward. Calloway held his ground, which was brave, or stupid, or both. "Touch her again," Dorian said, very quietly, "and I will take Iron Ridge apart stone by stone." "Try it," Calloway said. "The council will bury you. You've been burning bridges for 5 years, Ashveil. You have no alliances left. You have nothing left." He leaned in. "That's what happens when you throw away the only thing that mattered." Dorian hit him. Not a political challenge, not a formal dominance move, he hit him, clean and immediate, the way a man hits another man when something true has been said out loud that he can't take back. Calloway crashed into the terrace railing. His security moved. Dorian's people moved. The summit erupted. In the chaos, Celeste stood very still in the center of it all, watching Dorian Ashveil methodically, completely destroy the last shreds of his political standing, his alliances, his council reputation, his carefully maintained neutrality, all of it. Burning in real time, because someone had implied she could be taken. She watched him fight 3 of Calloway's security team with a savage grace that was terrible and beautiful and desperately, hopelessly sincere. Ezra appeared at her shoulder. "We should go," he said. "No," said Celeste. She watched until it was over. The Council of Elders suspended Dorian Ashveil's summit privileges within the hour. Calloway's people retreated. The hotel management spent 20 minutes pretending they hadn't watched an alpha fight 3 security wolves in the terrace garden, and the other summit attendees pretended the same with varying degrees of success. Dorian stood in the hotel courtyard, alone, his dress shirt torn at the shoulder, a cut along his jaw already closing. Rhett stood 15 feet away with the expression of a man who had run out of warnings. The courtyard was quiet. The lights of the hotel blazed above them. Snow had started falling while they weren't paying attention, soft and indifferent, covering everything equally. He heard her footsteps before he saw her. He always heard her footsteps. Celeste walked across the courtyard alone, her coat pulled around her shoulders, her heels leaving precise tracks in the fresh snow. She stopped 6 feet away from him. Close enough to see his face. Far enough that it was her choice, not proximity, keeping her there. Dorian looked at her for a long moment. The amber had faded from his eyes. What remained was grey, exhausted, and entirely unguarded. "I know," he said, before she could speak. "I know what I did. And I know what tonight looked like. And I know that you didn't ask for any of this." Celeste said nothing. She waited. "I spent 5 years looking for you," he said. His voice was rough. "Not to explain myself. Not even to apologize, though God knows I owe you that. I looked for you because the pack I built, the alliances I fought for, the entire structure of everything I thought I was doing, it meant nothing. It has meant nothing for 5 years. Because the only thing I built that was real was those 6 months with you, and I threw it away because I was afraid." The snow continued to fall. "Afraid of what?" Celeste asked quietly. "That you were too good," he said. "That you saw me, the real version, not the alpha, not the title, and that eventually you'd realize I wasn't worth what you were offering. I told myself it was politics. I told myself it was strategy. It was cowardice. I was a coward, Celeste, and I stood you up in front of 400 people and I called it duty." He moved then. Not toward her, he dropped. His knees met the snow-covered stone of the courtyard, and Dorian Ashveil, Alpha of Ashveil, knelt in the cold and the ash-colored light and looked up at the woman he had broken. "I am not asking you to forgive me tonight," he said. "I am not asking you to come back. I have no pack standing to offer you, no council backing, no political value. I burned all of it. Most of it I burned on purpose, because none of it seemed worth anything without you in it." His voice cracked. He let it. "I am asking you to say my name. Just once. So I know that the man who existed in those 6 months, the one you drew, the one who knocked over your ink jars, so I know he was real to you too." Celeste stood in the snow and looked down at him for a long, terrible, honest moment. She thought about the white dress. She thought about 45 minutes on a mountain road. She thought about Odalise and the print shop and the first canvas she had ever stretched alone. She thought about the ghost of the bond in her chest, not dead, she realized now, not quite. Only waiting, with the patience of something that knew its own worth. She closed the 6 feet between them. She did not pull him up. She crouched down until they were level, eye to eye, the snow falling between them like something being forgiven. "Dorian," she said. Just his name. Nothing more, nothing less. But the way she said it, quietly, without anger, without performance, the way you say the name of something you have kept safe in a closed hand for a very long time, was enough. His eyes closed. She watched something leave his face that had been there for 5 years. She did not tell him it was forgiven. Not yet. Forgiveness was not a moment, it was architecture, built slowly and load-bearing and not to be rushed. But she stayed. In the snow, in the courtyard, in the space between what they had been and what they might still build, she stayed. "You have a lot of work to do," she told him. "I know," he said. "And so do I. I know that too." She stood. She offered him her hand, not to take back, not to claim, but to help him off his knees. He took it. She pulled him up out of the ash and the cold and the wreckage of 5 years badly spent, and they stood together in the falling snow with the entire summit watching from warm windows above them. She did not put the bond back. Not that night. But she walked back inside beside him. And that, for now, was everything. But was it? Did Celeste make the right call letting him back in? Did Dorian truly earn that moment, or did he just survive long enough to find her? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you want to see the story continue, the sequel 5 Years of Her Name is coming next month. If this story hit you somewhere real, smash that like button and subscribe. Turn on notifications so you never miss a drop. Until next time, know your worth, protect your peace, and never let anyone call what they owe you dramatic.